Hey guys, there's a version of the pirate story that everyone knows. The tricorn hat, the parrot, the treasure map, the roguish grin. It's a good story. It's just not a true one. The real golden age of piracy, that brief window in the early 1700s when the black flag flew across the Atlantic and Caribbean, was something considerably more complicated than the legend suggests. It wasn't born from a love of adventure, it was born from desperation. From men who had been worked to exhaustion, cheated out of wages, beaten for minor infractions, and finally decided that a short, dangerous life on their own terms was preferable to a long, miserable one serving someone else. Tonight, we're going to find out what that life actually looked like. Not the legend, the reality. So settle in, let the noise of the modern world fall away, and let's go back to the open sea. Our story doesn't begin on a pirate ship. It begins on a merchant vessel somewhere in the Atlantic in the year 1716. You're in your early 20s, you're a sailor, and right now, 2 hours before dawn, you're already exhausted. You weren't woken gently. You were woken by the sharp bark of the boatswain, the senior sailor responsible for the deck crew, who has no interest in your comfort and considerable interest in getting the sails adjusted before the wind shifts. Your hands are raw. They've blistered and healed and blistered again from months of hauling on salt-stiffened ropes. The spray coming off the Atlantic soaks through your clothes and sits there, cold and heavy, against your skin. Every muscle in your back aches. Every muscle in your shoulders aches. They've ached every day for 6 months, since you left port in Bristol on a voyage that shows no signs of ending soon. This is your life, not adventure. Work. Unending. Backbreaking. Relentless work. You and a few dozen other men are a tiny human island in a vast and indifferent ocean. You're constantly adjusting the rigging, climbing high into the masts on swaying rope ladders, with nothing but 100 feet of empty air below you, furling and unfurling sails in blistering sun and freezing rain. You work the pumps to expel the foul water that seeps steadily into the hull. You scrub the decks, you mend the sails, you tar the ropes, day after day after day. For this, you're paid almost nothing, and even that isn't guaranteed. On a merchant ship, you don't see your wages until the voyage is completely finished. If the ship sinks, you get nothing. If you die of disease halfway through, your family gets nothing. And if you survive the whole thing and make it back to port, the captain, a man with absolute authority over every aspect of your life, can simply invent reasons to deduct from what you're owed. A misplaced tool, a moment of perceived laziness, a personal dislike. You've watched it happen to other men. You've watched sailors work an entire year and come home with barely enough to get drunk for a night before signing onto another ship to do it all again. The food matches the pay. Your daily ration is hardtack, a biscuit made from flour, water and salt, baked so hard it has to be soaked in water or watered down beer before your teeth can make any impression on it. It's almost always infested with weevils, small black beetles that live in the flour barrels and become a kind of involuntary seasoning. The meat is salted beef or pork, packed in brine for so long it has to be scraped and soaked for hours before it's edible. The drinking water comes from wooden casks where it slowly turns green and slimy. This diet, salt, starch, no fresh fruit, no vegetables, leads predictably to scurvy. You've seen what scurvy does to a man. Bleeding gums, teeth that fall out, old wounds that open back up, a mind that starts to wander, all from the simple absence of nourishment, and over all of this hangs the constant threat of the whip. The captain of a merchant vessel is absolute in his authority. His word is law, and his primary enforcement tool is the cat-o'-nine-tails, a whip with multiple knotted lashes that can reduce a man's back to bloody ruin for almost any offence. Being too slow on the rigging, arguing with an officer, being disliked. There's no trial, no appeal, no recourse, just the whistle of leather and the pain. Men in the Royal Navy had it worse in some ways. They hadn't even chosen to be there. Many were pressed into service, kidnapped off the streets of port towns or taken from other ships at sea and simply forced to serve. The work was just as brutal, the discipline even harsher, and added to everything else was the ever-present possibility of a cannonball ending the whole story without warning. So that's your world. Constant labour, terrible food, stolen wages, and arbitrary violence. No future except more of the same until the sea or sickness finally runs out the clock. Piracy, when you hear sailors whisper about it, doesn't sound romantic. It sounds like something else. It sounds like a way out. One grey morning, squinting at the horizon, you see it. A sail, moving fast. Faster than anything with legitimate cargo aboard has any reason to move. The men around you notice it too. Their faces change. A kind of quiet dread settles over the deck, but underneath your own fear, something else is stirring. Something small and dangerous you don't quite have a name for yet. The approaching vessel is a sloop, smaller and leaner than your merchant ship, built for speed rather than cargo. It's crowded with men, far more than a simple trading voyage would require. Your captain is shouting orders, his voice a register higher than usual. And then it happens. A puff of white smoke blooms from the sloop's side. A second later, the deep boom of a cannon reaches you, and a cannonball skips across the water just ahead of your bow. A warning shot. Stop your vessel or the next one won't be a warning. Your captain makes the only sensible calculation available to him. His ship is slower, his crew smaller, his cannons no match. His cargo is insured by wealthy men in London. His life is not. He orders the flag lowered, surrender. The pirates come aboard with grappling hooks and ropes, and they are not what you expected. They are sailors, the same as you. Same weathered faces, same calloused hands from the same kinds of ropes. But they move differently. There's a confidence in them, an ease, something you've never seen on a merchant vessel. They're well armed, pistols in their belts, swords at their sides, and they move through your ship like men who own the space they're standing in. They gather your crew on the main deck. Nobody is harmed, no immediate violence. A man steps forward, not the captain, but clearly the one the rest defer to. This is the quartermaster. On a pirate ship, the second in command, the man who represents the crew's interests handles daily discipline and ensures the fair division of plunder. His voice is calm. He tells your crew they have no interest in hurting ordinary sailors. They're here for the cargo, and for anyone who wants to come with them. He lays out the offer plainly. Stay with your captain, continue the voyage, return to the life you already know, or step across that railing, join the crew, and become a free man with an equal share of every prize the ship takes. You look at the faces around you. Most of your crewmates choose fear. They have families, they have roots, and they have a very clear picture of what the end of this road looks like if they're caught. But a few others, men like you, with little to lose and nothing waiting for them back in Bristol, you can see the same thing in their eyes that you feel in your chest. The quartermaster isn't threatening you. That's the thing. He's offering. They want volunteers. Men who will fight alongside them because they chose to, not because they were forced. You weigh it. On one side, a guaranteed future of exactly the misery you already know. On the other, something shorter probably, and far more dangerous. But yours. You and two others step forward. The quartermaster grins. Someone hands you a tin mug of grog, watered down rum, slightly sweet, and it tastes different from every drink you've had before. You're not sure exactly what that difference is, but you don't have to think about it for long. You're a pirate now. The relief doesn't last. Once your old ship has detached and sailed away, carrying fewer crew and considerably less cargo, reality begins to settle in. You've joined a society you don't yet know its rules. The quartermaster gathers the new recruits not long after and unrolls a worn sheet of parchment. This, he explains, is the ship's Articles of Agreement, the pirate code, and what he tells you next genuinely takes a moment to process. This document was not written by a captain and handed down from above. It was written by the crew, debated by the crew, and voted on by the crew. Every man aboard, from the most experienced sailor to the newest recruit, with an equal say. The captain himself is elected, and can be removed from command by a majority vote at any time. You have just joined a floating democratic republic. In 1716, that idea is radical enough to border on revolutionary. The quartermaster reads out the key articles. Every man has an equal vote in all major decisions: where to sail, whether to attack a target, what punishments to hand out. These aren't the captain's calls to make alone. They belong to the crew. No prey, no pay. You will receive no salary. Your income is your share of whatever is taken. The division is precise and agreed upon in advance. The captain receives 2 full shares. The quartermaster 1.5. Skilled specialists like the ship's surgeon or carpenter may receive slightly more. You, as a regular crew member, receive 1 full share. No deductions, no tricks. What the articles say is what you get. Conduct rules follow. Disputes between men must be settled on shore, with pistols or swords, to prevent fighting aboard the crowded ship. No women allowed on board. Every man keeps his weapons clean and ready. Lights out at 8, not a bedtime exactly, but a fire safety rule. On a wooden ship packed with gunpowder barrels and tarred rope, a single careless candle after dark could kill everyone. The rule is absolute. And then the article that surprises you most: compensation for injuries sustained in battle. Lose your right arm fighting for the crew and you receive 600 pieces of 8 from the ship's treasury before the rest of the plunder is divided. A leg, 500. An eye, 100. A promise that your crewmates will take care of you if you're broken in their service. It's a level of care you never imagined receiving on a merchant ship. You take the offered quill, dip it in ink, and sign your name. You're now formally a member of this crew. Equal vote, equal share, full membership in a society of outlaws that governs itself with surprising fairness. With the paperwork done, you take your first real look at your new home. The sloop is lean and fast. That much you already knew. Up close, it's been deliberately transformed. More cannons than any merchant vessel would carry, their iron muzzles lined up along newly cut gun ports. The deck stripped of everything non-essential to make room for fighting. This ship has been built for a purpose, and that purpose is catching other ships. Below deck you descend into a low-ceilinged space thick with warm, heavy air. The 'tween deck, where you and 80 other men will eat, sleep and spend the hours between watches. No private cabins, no walls, no doors, just rows of canvas hammocks slung from the overhead beams, hung so close together you could reach out and touch the man beside you in the night. The hammock turns out to be a genuine piece of engineering. Borrowed, you're told, from the indigenous peoples of the Americas, it sways with the ship's motion rather than fighting it, cradling you through even rough weather in a way a fixed bunk never could. The smell is its own experience. Unwashed bodies, staled rum, damp wool, and underneath everything, rising from the very bottom of the hull, the bilge, a dark, inaccessible space where seawater, spilled waste, and everything else the ship can't get rid of collects into a slow, foul soup that permeates the wood itself. It is inescapable. It is the defining scent of your new life. You find an empty spot, sling your hammock, and lie back in the swaying darkness, listening to the sounds of the ship settling around you. The groan of the timbers, the rhythm of the waves, the snoring of 80 men, the distant crack of canvas catching wind. This is home now. Your first full day as a pirate answers the question you'd been turning over since you came aboard. What exactly do you do all day? The answer is work. Almost the same work as before in most respects. The crew operates on a watch system. You're divided into 2 halves, each on duty for 4 hours, then off for 4, in a cycle that runs without interruption day and night. There's no weekend. There's no rest day. There is only the watch. On duty, you trim sails, maintain rigging, check the cannons, scrub the decks to keep the algae from making them dangerously slippery. You spend long hours at a task called caulking, hammering tarred rope fibres into the seams between hull planks to keep the sea out. Tedious, slow, necessary. You climb the mast for lookout duty, settling into the crow's nest at the top with a view in every direction of nothing but open water, and you stare into it for hours searching for another sail. Off watch, you eat, sleep, sharpen your knife, mend your clothes. After 4 hours of physical labour, sleep usually wins everything else. The work is nearly identical to merchant sailing. But the feeling is completely different. Nobody is screaming at you. Nobody is threatening the whip for a minor mistake. The men work with a quiet, purposeful efficiency. They know this ship belongs to them. A well-maintained vessel is a faster vessel. A faster vessel catches more prizes. Every man here is a shareholder in the operation, and the quality of their work has a direct bearing on their own fortune. You're not working from fear. You're working for yourself. The conversations are easier. The mood is lighter. You're treated as an equal. The days start to blur together. Watch, eat, sleep, watch. And slowly you begin to understand what the real enemy of the open sea actually is. It isn't the navy. It isn't the storm. It's the boredom. The flat, heavy, soul-flattening boredom of weeks between prizes, with nothing but ocean in every direction, and the same faces, the same sounds, the same salt smell surrounding you without end. As you settle into the rhythm of ship life, you start to understand how the power on board actually works, and it's not what you might expect. The captain is respected, his orders are followed, but his authority is not absolute, not in normal circumstances. His real power, his total unchallenged command, only activates at one specific moment, when a sail appears on the horizon. The moment a potential prize is spotted, something shifts across the whole ship. The casual, almost relaxed atmosphere tightens instantly. Every man finds his station, and the captain's voice becomes the only voice that matters. He decides the angle of approach. He decides when to fire. He decides when to board. In battle, his authority is complete and no one questions it, because in the chaos of a sea fight there simply isn't time. But the moment the battle ends, that authority steps back down. He becomes a man among equals again. He cannot order a flogging on personal grounds. He cannot change the ship's course on a whim. He was elected to his position, and if he proves cowardly or consistently fails to find prizes, the crew can vote him out and elect someone else. It has happened. It will happen again. The real power in daily life belongs to the quartermaster. He is the crew's advocate, their elected representative, the man responsible for distributing rations, settling disputes, administering punishments as voted upon under the articles, and leading the boarding party when a prize is taken. He is the one who controls the plunder between its capture and its division, accounting for every coin and every barrel to ensure the split is exactly what the articles require. You watch him move through the ship each day, and you begin to understand the elegance of what these men have built. One man holds the power of war, another holds the power of peace. Neither can fully overrule the other. No single person can ever become the kind of tyrant these men escape to get here. It's a crude system, built by rough men from bitter experience. But it works, and in 1716, on a wooden ship in the middle of the Atlantic, it is arguably more genuinely democratic than most of the governments these men were born under. The food is, initially, a disappointment. Hardtack, salted meat, dried peas, stagnant water cut with rum. Nearly identical to what you left behind on the merchant vessel, and you'd be lying if you said you weren't hoping for better. But there's a difference, and it matters. A merchant ship is on a schedule. Port to port, cargo to deliver, schedule to keep. A pirate ship answers to no one and goes where it wants, which means when stores run low, you stop. You pull into a small, uninhabited island somewhere in the Caribbean. The crew goes ashore in longboats with hunting in mind rather than fighting. You spend the day tracking wild pigs through dense jungle, the ground soft under your feet, actual earth under actual trees, a sensation you'd almost forgotten. The animals are brought back to the beach, a fire is built, and fresh meat is roasted over a wooden grill called a boucan. The taste of fresh, unsalted food is so profoundly good it takes you a moment to identify the feeling. It's satisfaction, something you haven't felt in a long time. At sea, men trail fishing lines from the stern, hoping for tuna or anything large enough to share. The most prized catch is the sea turtle, plentiful in these waters, easy to catch while sleeping on the surface, capable of feeding the entire crew, and able to be kept alive on deck for weeks, which makes them the closest thing to a living larder a ship can carry. But the real feast comes after a capture. When you board a prize and discover the merchant captain's private pantry, the reaction of your crew is something close to joy. Fine wine, white flour for actual bread, sugar, spices worth small fortunes, live chickens, sometimes a pig, things the captain had been eating privately while his sailors lived on hardtack and beetles. That night, the ship becomes a banquet hall. The cook, normally just another sailor with slightly more experience near a fire, becomes briefly the most important man aboard. The smell of roasting meat, freshly baked bread, wine from tin mugs, men singing, talking louder than usual, laughing at things that aren't that funny but feel funny tonight. For a few hours, you live better than kings. This is the reward. Not the gold, or not only the gold. It's the food, the warmth, the simple pleasure of being full in the company of people who aren't threatening you. It doesn't last, of course. A knife slips on wet rigging. A bone cracks from a fall onto the deck. A fever appears from nowhere in the middle of the night and works its way through half the crew before anyone understands what it is. Injury and illness are constants on any ship, and on a pirate vessel, your options are limited. Most crews don't have a trained physician. A surgeon captured on a merchant or naval vessel was considered one of the most valuable prizes imaginable. more valuable in many cases than the cargo. Crews would do nearly anything to convince a captured surgeon to join them voluntarily, offering full shares and good treatment. He was one of the very few men a pirate crew might actually compel to stay, because his knowledge was the difference between a crewman surviving a serious wound and not. If no surgeon was available, the role fell to whoever had the most relevant skills. Often that was the ship's carpenter. Which sounds alarming until you understand the logic. The most common major surgery at sea was amputation, and nobody on board was more practiced with a saw, more comfortable making a clean, swift cut, more capable of doing it without flinching than the man who spent his days cutting wood to keep the ship together. On other ships, it might be the cook. The man most skilled with knives, most comfortable with the physical realities of working with flesh. The medical chest itself, usually taken from a captured vessel, held the tools of a brutal trade. Bone saws, surgical knives, probes for wounds, forceps. And alongside these, the ship's true medicine of first resort, rum, in quantities sufficient to blur the pain enough that the carpenter could do what needed to be done. It was grim. It was imperfect. It was nothing like what a wealthy man ashore could access. But it was more than the merchant navy offered, where a sick sailor was often simply a problem to be waited out. Here, at least, the articles promised compensation. The crew had voted on what your body was worth if battle took a piece of it. That promise didn't make the carpenter's saw any less terrifying. But it meant something in a life where very little had ever been promised to you at all.